The Ironman consists of a 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike ride, and then a full 26.2 marathon run. And those are consecutive, one right after the other. And you get 17 hours to complete the entire event. If you don't finish it in 17 hours, you're disqualified. My life before I started doing Ironmans consisted of 13 years of serious drug and alcohol abuse. I started drinking beer at the age of 13, 3 or 4 grams of cocaine a day, and over a bottle and a half of whiskey per day. Living in my car, being jailed, arrested, expelled from high school for cocaine, kicked out of my parents' house, fights, arrests, 3 DWIs. I've been through the ringer.
Todd's early life was perfectly normal.
Since the day he was born, his personality drew everybody to him.
Oh, he was constant motion. And before he could walk, Todd would be on all fours in his crib and rock. He just wanted to be in motion. He still can't sit still. It's not part of his nature. He was always a very active child. Todd stood at the side of the coffee table, took his first step, started to stumble a little bit and turned it into a run and never walked again. He basically ran through what most children walk through.
Most households have a little tension now and then, and a little yelling now and then. But I think other than that, he was wonderfully taken care of. His mother did a beautiful job.
When he was about 3, his mother and I separated. Todd's mother had a number of drug habits. She had smoked pot, she had been a beer and alcohol drinker. She got into cocaine, she got into heroin, she got into speed. She was 19 or so when she got pregnant. She was way too young. She loved Todd dearly, but she was not at a point where she wanted to settle down, be married, and raise a family. She decided that she wanted me to take custody of him for a few years while she got her life straightened out, and then wanted to retake custody of him. It wasn't like he got bounced back and forth from one place to another. I believe that she felt Todd would be better off with her just out of the picture and me to take care of him. She knew that he would be well taken care of, but I think that she felt that she introduced more trouble into his life than what she cured.
So forgive me if I laugh, it's just to hide the tears.
2 of her very best friends. One went to England for an abortion and died there. The other one had a little boy, and her mother took him to Florida to see her mother, the great-grandmother. And on the way home, a wing fell off the plane and they were both killed. Now these were 2 tragedies to the 2 best friends of his mother, who was really too young to know how to handle. And I always felt that was part of the reason she went into drugs, to sort of hide these things.
She was killed in an automobile accident, and he was about 3.5 when she died. It was the first single car accident in the state of Ohio that was ruled a suicide. She ran into a bridge abutment in the rain. 2 days after one of her friends telling her that if he were going to kill himself, he'd run himself into a bridge.
Mama, won't you stay here with me? You promised you would never leave. Stay.
The autopsy showed that she had a minor trace of speed that was probably left over from some other time, but she was not, she had been off of drugs for quite a while when she died.
I think every addict who's using is on a slow suicide. And if you want to do it slow by snorting cocaine for the rest of your natural life, okay. If you want to do it quick by driving off a bridge, so be it. A lot of people think about killing themselves. A lot of times you don't want to be dead. You want the pain to stop.
Her mother felt that with Louise's attitude, she could have just as well been mad at the bridge and decided she was just going to drive through it. She never quite accepted that it was suicide, but I'm pretty sure it was. Her mother-in-law would say to me, "We are not strong-willed, we're determined." And obviously Todd has inherited a good deal of the determination. I know at 3.5 he was too young to have understood what it was that was going on. As he got older, I think there was some desire to maybe subconsciously go through some of what she had gone through. My big fear as Todd grew up was that he would in certain ways become his mother, and he did. When he was 4 years old, barely over 4, he was riding a full-size 10-speed bicycle, and he would push down on one pedal and his leg would go all the way down until the other knee caught the bar, and then he would flip himself back over to the other side. But the bike was way too big for him. That didn't bother him. And the first day he tried it, he kept crashing, came to the door crying, and I went over and comforted him, and he went right back out, did it, came back crying, went and comforted him. Third time he came to the door and he sort of stood and looked at me and was all ready to cry, and I started laughing. And he started laughing. From then on, every time he crashed, he never came back in.
My life's had its ups and downs, but for yours I will be around. I will always be around. And she cried, stay with me.
Todd's relationship with his stepmother, with my second wife, started out very well. I still remember the day that we got married, all the way back to the house. Todd kept looking at Cindy and saying, "Are you my mother now?" And she'd say, "Yes," and that was great.
When Terry and Cindy were first married, Todd tested her immediately, because kids will do that. Not enough can be said for Cindy. She tried so hard with this kid. But to him, she still was not his mother, and he didn't have to take any lip from her.
Somewhere very early in Todd's life after his mother died, I think that door got shut. And a part of Todd said, if I can't have my real mother, I won't have one.
I'm sure a lot of the acting out behavior that we saw was a result of the pain that he felt and the loss and the inability to help himself to deal with that, or to let his feelings be known so that others could help him.
Todd never let Cindy in, and that she was always there for him, but he didn't let her in.
He had a wonderful stepmother who was supportive and was always willing to come and talk to us to try to help and understand, but was equally frustrated with how to help Todd through his difficult time.
The problem was I was not very good at being the disciplinarian, and she ended up having to be. And that wasn't the way it should have been.
step parents should just be the host or hostess of that child, and the birth father or mother should be the one who does the disciplining, and that makes sense. But we didn't know that at the time.
My feeling was always, Todd's an intelligent child. If I simply explain to him why I want him to be this particular way, then of course he'll understand that, and he'll be the way I want him to be. And I would spend hours, and Cindy would say, just tell him no.
And that made it hard for Cindy, because if she tried to discipline, I don't have to do it, you're not my mother.
Todd, I think, grew to resent that. And the problem was Cindy could not have loved him any more if Todd had been her child.
She was a wonderful mother to him.
Child, you hold my hand, stay with me. Child, you hold my hand, stay with me.
When we moved into this house, Todd was maybe 6 years old, and everybody around this neighborhood played hockey. And Todd said, I want to play hockey. And I said, Todd, you don't know how to skate. I said, learn how to skate this winter, and next winter you can play hockey. Well, down in back of us is a creek that froze over all winter. Todd was down there every day after school. He'd come up with his cheeks bright red and 1 foot soaked, and he learned to skate. And the next year he started playing hockey, and he just loved it.
He was probably 5 or 6 years old, and he was playing hockey. I happened to be the general manager of the arena at that time, and I remember his mom coming to get me to carry him from his car into the arena because he forgot his skate guards, and that was probably the first time that I really had met her and met him.
He started playing competitive hockey probably at about 7. He played defense, and he was constantly diving in front of the pucks. Coach would keep telling him not to do that, but that's what he wanted to do. So then he decided he wanted to be a goalie, because the goalie's job was to dive in front of the puck.
The most difficult position in hockey, and one that is hard to coach and hard to develop, is goaltending. And so whenever you see someone with gifted ability like we saw in Todd, and a fire in the belly that he seemed to possess, you wanted to nurture that along.
Well, the first game he had, we went to Fort Wayne and played an all-star game. Normally, in that level, they'd have 15 shots in a game. Todd had 52 shots, and he just loved it. And that was it. From then on, he was going to be a goalie.
Todd was a good hockey player. He was a great goalie, very competitive, not a real big guy, but very quick, and really read the game very well, and he played extremely well.
Pat Jablonski is a terrific young player, and one of my great asterisks to my coaching career is that as a Bantam, I cut Pat from one of my teams.
We tried out for the same team one year, and I didn't make it, and that was I was a Bantam, and I was trying out for midget AAA. Todd made it, as well as another kid that was going to play for Northview, and I ended up hanging back and playing AAA. We always had a big rivalry. He was always one of the better goalies in Toledo, if not the best, and I'd like to think that I was when I was younger also.
We went through a period when Todd was about 10. He was very mad at me because I wouldn't move to Detroit so that he could play in a more difficult league. He wanted that higher competition, which is what got him into travel hockey.
Todd showed promise right from the get-go, and part of it was his fiery personality. He hates to lose at anything, and that's what made him such a desirable character to have on your team. I made him play backup goalie one night, which means basically sit the bench. And this was in travel hockey. He was probably 13 years old. We're playing Trenton, Michigan, which was a pretty powerful team. I hear Todd down at his end of the bench. Every time Trenton is having an offensive rush, I hear him saying, "Score, score." score. And I go down there and I go, what did you just say? He goes, hey, man, I want him to put the puck in the net so you'll pull him and put me in there. I mean, he wanted to be in goal every game. There wasn't a backup bone in his body. But I understood it wasn't that he was rooting against his team. He was rooting for himself. He wanted to be in there. And that was Todd Crandell.
Growing up, you've got travel teams, you've got high school teams, and as a goaltender, Todd shined. I mean, he was always the best of the best. I mean, he made saves, and he didn't only make the saves. You could tell he watched TV and he wanted to look good doing it. So as a younger kid watching that, you look up to him, and he was phenomenal.
Todd traveled for several years, went through peewees and bantams, and the next age group was juniors. And juniors is when most kids go to high school.
There's a deeper pool of talent that would participate in Junior A hockey, so the level is naturally higher. It would be a place where a player would go to play if they were hoping to go on and pursue a collegiate career or even a professional career.
When Todd was a sophomore in high school, his travel team played against Northview twice a year and beat them badly both times. Todd was playing 75 games a year, and the high school was playing 20. Todd was playing against Pat LaFontaine, who played for the Islanders, and Aya Frady, who played for Toronto. These were the guys that were playing in Detroit.
In hockey, you've got to be discovered at a young age, which he was. At 15, 16 years old, to be able to play juniors is a big step in hockey.
I distinctly remember coming home from our annual summer vacation at Cape Cod, the end of my sophomore year in high school, getting my letter from Paddock Pool's Junior A team, the next step in Detroit, and saying, you're coming, and running up from the mailbox ecstatic about, yes, this is it. This is my next step that I'm going to make. My dad said, well, you're not playing there next year. And that was it.
He made a junior team, and I believe his dad wouldn't let him play. He said he's not driving to Detroit at 16 years old.
The man who was going to coach it changed jobs and was unable to coach, and the team was canceled. So Todd had to go play in high school.
What do you mean I'm not going there? I said, no, you're going to play high school hockey, and then maybe the next year when you're old enough to be driving back and forth to Detroit, you can do that. And I was just dumbfounded, and I still am to this day. My dad and I still have different opinions on this. He's wrong, and I'm right.
I think that was a turning point for him.
Junior A hockey was really a stepping stone into Division I college hockey. And high school hockey in Toledo takes you nowhere. Every year you play high school hockey in Toledo is a wasted year as far as I'm concerned.
There's really no harm done to any player who stays in high school hockey. In fact, oftentimes I think if they jump out of their age group in high school and try to pursue a higher level of hockey too soon, they're physically not ready, they're mentally not ready, and they're emotionally not ready. And it's a machinery that tends to grind people up and spit them out. It often requires leaving home, leaving friends, leaving family. And that's hard enough when you're 20 years old, but when you're 16 and 17 years old, and that's quite a transition.
In all 4 of the banquets that we were involved with Cooper, he made the remark that Todd was the single most competitive person he had ever run across.
To be on the same team with Todd was a Charles Dickens metaphor. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. When he was awesome, no one was better. And when he wasn't, he could point the finger at other kids letting down in the game, and he wasn't afraid to say so. If he thought it and he believed it, he was in your face and he let you know, including the coach. If he didn't think my head was in a game, or if he didn't think I was running a sharp enough practice, he would fire a few shots across the bow.
When he got to high school, the shots were much slower. He was getting scored on more often because somebody would take a shot, Todd would make 3 moves to save it, and it'd go in the net. It was just slower than what he was used to.
Your timing's off. I mean, you're used to things going, say, 90 miles an hour, and all of a sudden now it's going 40 miles an hour, and It's probably almost on the same level as Nolan Ryan throwing a 90-mile-an-hour fastball at you, and then Joe getting up and throwing a 50-mile-an-hour fastball. You think you'd be able to tee off on it, but for a few pitches, your time is going to be so far off, you're not going to do very well.
You know, puck gets shot, it gets shot, but it may not come off the stick quite as quick in high school as it would in junior A hockey. So certainly the level of hockey probably didn't maybe, serve to move his skills maybe as quickly as junior A hockey could have. I'll never forget a game in a Thanksgiving tournament in which we were playing a state powerhouse, and we were winning the game 2-0, and Todd was playing so terrific that even in moments when he should have froze the puck and stopped the play because the team around him was exhausted, he would kick the puck back out to the other team and dare them to shoot the puck at him.
Yeah, I used to do that frequently.
And as luck would have it, you do that too often, you get burnt. And he gave up a goal in the last minute of the game. But we still won 2-1 because at that moment he knew that he was so in tune with what was going on in that game. There was no way he was going to lose that game.
When I knew I was on top of my game and things were going well, it was more of like a confidence thing, a little bit of, like I said, boredom. More so, here, buddy, you missed the first time, try it again.
That's how on fire he was. That's the kind of kid he was.
I never wanted to be like a, act like an arrogant, cocky jerk, but I also sometimes, let them know what was happening out there.
For Todd choosing the high school route, he wasted those 3 or 4 years he played there, whereas I played in Detroit and played against better competition, and I got better. If you're too good for the level you're playing at, you're not doing yourself any good. You're not going to get better. You have to play against people that are better than you at whatever sport it is to get better yourself.
It just wasn't as much fun. It wasn't the competitive level that he was used to, and that was very disappointing to him. And I think if anything made much of a turn, that's probably what it was.
I think if he would have been more busy and his time would have been more taken up, I got out of high school at 1 o'clock and I was on the road by 4 o'clock and I didn't get home till 11 every night. I didn't have time to get in trouble. I'm not saying I would have, but I think he would have played at a different level and maybe he would have been more serious about it and not thinking about partying. He'd have been maybe thinking more about his hockey career and where he could take that.
I started drinking, took my first sip of alcohol at the age of 13 at the end of my 8th grade year. The next time I drank was my freshman year at Northview, and I drank an entire bottle of Jack Daniels and took speed along with that. I went from 2 sips of alcohol, or a couple sips of a beer, to a 5th of Jack and some speed the second time I drank. And I ended up urinating all over my friend's closet thinking I was in the bathroom. Right then and there, I should have been like, okay, this is not for me.
And before we ever even graduated from high school, we were crushing up Valium and snorting Valium off the desk in our math class.
I think it was the first or second week of my senior year at Northview. Snorted about a gram of Coke before school in the Northview parking lot. That was the first time I did Coke. And right then, I was like, that's what I've been searching for in the drug world. I mean, it grabbed a hold of me and that was it. I mean, every waking moment I had was either doing Coke, coming off of Coke, or thinking about it and trying to find more ways to get it.
It was probably a November night. We took a bus trip to Jackson, Lumen Christi. We loved to go to Jackson because the arena was an absolute hellhole. It would be packed with rabid fans who hated whoever Lumen Christi was playing, and we were no exception. We had a number of terrifically talented kids on the team that year. Well, we went up there, and that night we couldn't have been better. We've barely beaten Lumen Christi in the past. We beat them that night 10-0. We couldn't be stopped, and no pucks were going past Todd Crandell. He was just awesome. I couldn't have been more excited about the prospects of that year. I mean, frankly, I was already making plans for returning to the state championships that year because I thought we'd have a chance to maybe win it all. And that was always my expectation for great players, and certainly Todd was no exception. He was the kind of kid that could have led you to a state title.
We're in the back of a school bus, and before the before we left, we got a bag of cocaine. All the way up there, there was about 4 of us that were doing lines. And it actually turned into a great game. Todd and another guy that played on the team played an outstanding game.
That night, when I got home from the road trip, I received a call from one of my assistant coaches. Told me what he saw and told me what he heard. And that was that a couple of my players, one of them being Todd, had used cocaine on the bus trip to Jackson Lumen Christi. I was absolutely devastated. I couldn't fathom that any kid that age could use cocaine, let alone one that was as smart and as talented and had so much going for him, and to have the crassness to not just use it, but to use it in front of others and to use it on a school bus traveling to an athletic function. I was stunned. I had to go confess to an athletic director and a principal that I had extensive drug use on my team, and not just on my team, but on one of their school buses. I removed Todd from the team.
I was livid, absolutely livid, and I still am to this day.
He was very angry, was very upset, and I'm sure in many ways felt like that his behavior didn't justify that severe of action.
They didn't come up and actually catch me doing it. It was someone saw me and they told on me, and that was it.
He knew the rules. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew that he was violating them, and he didn't care.
It was probably really difficult for him because I know I was, a pain in the butt back then.
Did he care about me? Yeah. Did he care about his teammates? Yeah. But I don't think he cared about himself at that moment, because he did what made him feel good at that moment, not what would make him feel good for a long time.
I kind of felt like I was doing Northview a favor by playing for them, and I don't want to sound arrogant. It's just coming from the hockey that I did, by going to play for Northview, I was like, listen, I'm going to do this the way I want, and I basically don't need anybody telling me anything else.
Well, little did I know that it was only going to get worse. Literally within 24 hours, I kick him off the hockey team. The principal and the school district kick him out of the school. It was horrible. It was awful. Just awful.
And we found out the next morning about what had happened, and that was a major confrontation, and then it was trying to get help for him and trying to work on it. But we just deep down inside felt, well, basically Todd's a good kid, he'll get straightened out, he'll get through this. Didn't quite go that way.
My decision to remove Todd from the team was probably the quintessential moment, coaching moment in my career. I took away from him the thing that he loved the most, playing hockey at a very high level with his friends and with his other friends and family watching him do it. In my mind, I took away the one thing that he cared the most about. I love Todd Crandell. I still love him. But I loved him at that moment. But just as a father loves a son, he had to be disciplined. He had to be corrected in his behavior. He was out of bounds. And it was now affecting other people. And suddenly winning hockey games, which seemed very important, it now seemed like we weren't, it wasn't just losing a hockey game, it was losing the game of life.
Todd's always done everything to the extreme. So when he decided to be a bad boy, he decided to be a real bad boy.
Everything Todd does, he does the best. If he was doing cocaine, he did cocaine until he ran out of money or passed out.
Todd's never done anything part way, ever.
And, you know, when you grow up and you see Todd, you see an in-shape, good-looking young kid who's an excellent hockey player. You would never suspect him to use drugs and alcohol, especially at the age of 17 or 16 years old. I mean, you had to constantly, just watch what he was doing. If somebody handed him a handful of pills, down the hatch. He didn't ask what they were. You know, and he could have been doing cocaine and heroin all night, and if somebody came up and handed him a fistful of Valiums, he'd have took them. He didn't care.
Yeah, he didn't even have to know what it was. If we'd be at a party and they'd have prescription drugs, it didn't matter what it was, he'd take it. And he wouldn't take just one or two, he'd take as many as they'd allow him to take. And if he could have the whole bottle, he probably would have took them all.
He would drink every day for, say, 3 weeks, and then he'd take a couple days off. I think that's because he was out of money, or he did something and he was in trouble.
You would think that the people that we called burnouts would have been the ones that did the most drugs, but in all reality, it was the preppy kids that were doing the most drugs because they had the access to it. Mm-hmm. And we had one friend that his dad was a doctor, and he used to get them easy. So we'd go over his house and get drugs.
To be honest, there was really never a good time with Todd once he got drinking and on drugs, unless you caught him in the first 6 hours.
A day in the life of Todd and myself would have, back in the days, would have been waking up at noon, shaking off the hangover, taking a shower, going to find some more drugs and alcohol, partying all night until the sun came up, and doing it all over again the next day.
It was unreal, though, the drinking. I mean, he was on medication not to drink, and he'd drink with it anyway. And he'd be like, oh, these don't even work.
When I did cocaine, if I had a gram or a quarter ounce, whatever the amount of cocaine I had, as soon as I did my first line of that cocaine, I did not stop until it was entirely gone.
Todd and I did just about everything. I never did the hard stuff like heroin like he did, but you know, when it came to cocaine and marijuana and prescription drugs and alcohol, we did it until it was gone.
I, was out partying and doing drugs one night and had to come into work for my dad the next day, and had taken so many drugs the night before and was still eating a bunch of pills that morning that I went into my dad's office and was puking full capsules of these pills back in the toilet, and then sticking my hand back in the toilet and eating them again. It was getting to the point where I was doing so much cocaine that they call it, rusty pipes, or that's what I would refer to, when you'd get nosebleeds. I'd continue just to snort the blood and the cocaine right back up the same nostrils.
We didn't really see a change in him until he was probably 16 or so. He did a remarkable job of hiding what he was doing. We had a couple of neighbors come over, and apparently Todd and their son had a party at their house at some time, and they wanted to tell us what had gone on. And they sat in our living room for a half an hour and said things like, something's got to be done, and this is getting out of hand. Then we said, yeah, you're right, I suppose. And they left, and my wife and I looked at each other and said, do you have any idea what they were talking about?
Well, I didn't really know he had a problem until he was in high school, to tell you the truth. Because anytime he had any trouble, he said, don't tell Grandma. So I didn't get told. And I wish I had.
Our neighbors probably knew more about what Todd was up to with drinking and drugs than we did, and didn't say anything, assuming probably that we knew, and just couldn't do anything about it.
He kept me in the dark for a long time. I knew he drank, and I've heard rumors that he partied, but he never showed his partying side, drug use around me.
He was deceiving his parents. He was deceiving his friends. He was certainly deceiving his coach. But more importantly, he was deceiving himself. And I think when you make that decision as a human being that it's okay to cheat yourself, cheating others comes easy. And that's where Todd was at.
Todd would come home after we had gone to bed, and I'd leave the hall light on and our door open a little bit. So a lot of times he would know that I was in bed and know that I wasn't going to see him when he came in. Or he would stick his head in the door with the light shining in the hallway behind him and black in our room, say, I'm home, good night, and go to bed. And I wouldn't have any idea what kind of condition he was in.
I'd come home hammered all the time, and I'd stick my head in the door and, hey, Dad, I'm home, and that was it. If I came home and he was asleep, that was good, because I'd just flick the light off and go into my room. Once I got in my room, it was put on the headphones, listen to some music, some sad music, if you will, some mellower tunes, and continue to drink and do drugs, and a lot of times would just sit and cry pretty heavily for a few hours until the sun came up again and I had to get back and face the music again.
It took me a while to catch on because he was good at covering himself up and using you, meet me for lunch, and then he wouldn't eat, he'd just drink. It's always a bar and grill for lunch. And he got me 2 times with this, and I was upset at myself. He's like, go ahead and order, I don't know what I want. So I'd order my lunch and appetizer and pop, and he'd always go, I'm not very hungry. He goes, I have Absolute. Todd's drinking problem was out of hand.
Todd's always been a pretty honest person, but part of that honesty is just to leave certain things out of the conversation. Oh, did I forget to tell you that, yes, the police chased me around the McDonald's parking lot until they caught me? No.
He always used to tell me with drug use, you ever do any of this, I'll kill you. As he's sitting with the pile of cocaine at his table. Look what it's done to me. As he was doing it. It's like he had 2 lives, One life with people he could be himself with the drug use, and the other life where he tried to hide it.
After Todd would have graduated, came to one of my tryouts and sat crying, intoxicated, on the bench, watching me run tryouts for something that he participated in just a year earlier, and wept. I looked over and I saw a broken kid still. I didn't see anybody picking up the pieces, including myself. Very hard. Very hard.
Strange, I wonder what the winds of change have done to you. Is it what you did or what you seen, or all the things you could not fix that affected you? Justice singing, love and pain, sacrifice.
Somehow I always knew or was pretty sure that this was something Todd would grow out of or get done with. My fear was that he would kill himself in the meantime.
We went to a cocaine party with piles of cocaine on a pool table. Well, he did so much that when we went back to the hotel room that we were staying in, he's laying on the bed, and you could see his heart beating out of his chest, and he was complaining, thinking that he's having a heart attack. And at that point, I thought he was going to die.
I could drink 3 or 4 beers and be done, say I'm done. To where Todd, he was just getting going, and then it turned to hate and evil and yelling and screaming, and he started thinking about his mom and school and missed opportunities, and it was just all hate. I used to tell him that all the time. I go, here comes the hate. And he'd always be trying to tell me, I can handle it, I can handle it. I'm like, Todd, you can't.
We were in an apartment above his dad's studio, had probably $400 worth of alcohol in the apartment, and he was feeling bad about the death of his mother and really depressed and was drinking himself totally drunk every day for days. He was in his own little world and wouldn't listen to nobody, wouldn't talk to anybody. He was pretty depressed at that point. Had one song playing on the radio over and over again, probably 100 times, Angie by the Stones. And to tell you the truth, it drove me nuts. It drove me crazy.
His grandmother lives in a beautiful home on a creek. When you look out this patio window, it's just a nice view. You got 10 Mile Creek, flowers, trees, rapids. And I was standing there one day, I go, man, isn't this nice? And he comes up, looks out the window, he goes, it's all black.
Depression, sadness, suicide, that was normal to me. Sunshine and happiness and a good lifestyle, I'm like, who the heck is that for? That's not reality to me.
When Todd was a drunk, he was a mad, nasty drunk.
If you start talking about his hockey career or his mother or anything else that made him angry, it was over. Get away. Get him somewhere safe and go home, because the fun's over.
He hated his birth mother, and he certainly he didn't care a lot about Cindy. And I set him down on the back step one day, and I said, we're going to talk about your two mothers. And he said, I won't talk. And I said, yeah, you're going to. He said that Louise had killed herself because she didn't want him.
The only time that he ever wanted to talk about his mother was when he was drunk. And there was no talking to him when he was drunk because he didn't make any sense. He was incoherent.
When he was at his mom's grave, he very upset and, of course, under the influence. And I think he was even drinking at the time and spitting on her grave, and he wanted to urinate on her grave. And I stopped him from that. I thought that was a little bit too far.
When he was really drunk, the venom against his own mother, his birth mother, was so strong it was hard to believe.
You know, I think that anger was what was killing him. He wanted to take it out on something, and he was taking it out on himself.
I battled with suicide for years. I can remember even as early as 4th and 5th grade thinking about that, not being here. I always respected my mom for killing herself because it's like she wasn't happy, and she had the balls to drive herself into a cement wall and check out.
There was times where Todd spoke of suicide, you know, and of course I would always, you know, try to talk him out of it, try to cheer him up. You know, I'd do anything to try to get him not to think that way.
I wanted to be gone so badly. I wanted it to happen with drugs and alcohol, and I was shocked a lot of times. I'd wake up the next morning and go, God damn, how did I survive that? What is it gonna, how much of this crap is it gonna take to kill me?
There's many times where I felt that he was serious. You know, there's a point in his life where I believed he wanted to die.
It's my body, I can die if I want to. It's my body, I do what I want. It's my party, I could cry if I want to. It's my party, do what I want. It's my party, I get high if I want to. It's my party, I do what I want.
I remember one night when the doorbell rang and I answered the door, and there was a police officer standing there, and he wanted to know if Todd Crandell was home, and I said, yeah. And Jason ran upstairs and got Todd and brought him down, and they put handcuffs on him and took him away. Took him into jail, where he spent the night.
Jail didn't really have much of an effect. It was just the time that you spent there. Once you got out, you did the same thing you did before you went. It really didn't deter him at all. He did the same thing.
On a couple occasions, a telephone went through the window and the door got knocked down, and I hid my car over at the church.
Out off Centennial Road, they've got those rock quarries, but they've got big, probably as high as this patio here, 10, 12-foot mounds of stone, so you can't drive off the quarry. And he tried running his grandma's car up it a few times.
He was ready to fight somebody at the drop of a hat.
There was a time when Todd was drinking again. I wasn't out with him, but he called me to come get him. I walk in, and Todd's rubbing the owner's head and telling him how much he loves him. Now, granted, he didn't really know the owner that well, but Todd was pretty well lit up. So I went in there, sat down, I said, you ready to go? He's like, no, I'm not done drinking. I said, Todd, I didn't come here for you to drink. I came here to get you. And he kept saying, well, I'll kick your ass. I looked at him and said, I don't think so. He goes to get off the bar stool, falls down flat on his back, laying in the middle of the bistro. And he's going, I'm going to kick your ass. I'm going to kick your ass. Help me up.
Todd and I ended up, first time, only time in our lives, having a fist fight in his room. And he took a swing at his stepmother, and we didn't realize he was drunk at the time. I can remember punching him, and I can remember him punching me.
It was October 6th of 1986. Never forget this day. As usual, I was out drinking and drugging. Brought a girl that I was dating home at the time into my room, which was forbidden at the time. Those were my parents' rules, and of course I didn't respect anything that they had to say or do. And I think what had happened was my dad overheard me on the phone talking about going to get a tattoo the next day and blowing off work for my dad. He came in, we're arguing and so forth, and then when my stepmom came in and grabbed this girl and started pulling her out and asking her to leave, all that inner rage and everything that I had resentments towards my stepmom for years just exploded. I remember her being in front of some of my trophies and hitting her, and then hitting my dad and throwing him through my closet door.
That was really the only confrontation like that we ever had. We did some arguing and some yelling and things like that, which is perfectly normal, I think. But that was the only time that it escalated into something like that.
My dad's sitting where you are, and I'm snorting the cocaine right in front of him, and he's got tears running down his eyes, you know, and we're having a conversation about my insurance money he's going to use when I'm dead, or what it's going to be like when I'm gone and stuff, and that didn't even faze me. And I remember distinctly looking at him and saying, if you even think of getting up and trying to take this cocaine from me, I'll fucking kill you. Somehow in my deranged thinking was thinking, if I get down to Florida and everything's gonna be great. You know, I'm gonna be on the beach and do this and I'll get a job. Well, I was on the beach all right, but I was sleeping on the beach and I wasn't working at all.
There was times when we were living in Florida, we didn't have anything in the cupboards to eat. You know, we're opening a can of mushroom caps and splitting it. You know, we had absolutely no money whatsoever, no food, but for some reason, somehow, we always had drugs or alcohol. We slept on the beach in sleeping bags numerous times, you know. No matter who we lived with, there was always a party. And eventually the people that we lived with always got tired of us being there, so they'd kick us out. So in between all those, we'd sleep on the beach. We'd have nowhere to live, nothing to eat. We'd be living out of the back of his Regal. His Buick Regal was our home many times. We were drinking in a hotel room on the beach, and a bum walked by the door and heard our party and stopped and was yelling in the screen, does anybody want to buy anything? Todd was like, yeah, I'll take some, and before he ever knew what it was, he was, you know, putting some in his nose. After Todd did some, the guy goes, well, this is crystal meth. And I'd say about 15, 20 minutes later, it started getting to Todd. His heart started racing, and he, you know, started getting buzzed or something. And he flipped out and destroyed the whole hotel room. Just started breaking things. I mean, he was so obsessed, he wanted to break the frame of the bed in two. You know, he took the TV through it, broke the dresser, ripped the shower door down. You know, he just was flipping out and destroyed the hotel room.
He just had these things battling inside his head that he was trying to numb himself so he wasn't facing up to them or anything else.
I think for me personally, there was more involved than just the drugs and alcohol. You know, my mother's suicide, whether I want to admit it or not, caused a big gaping hole in me.
He was not happy in that situation. He was just numbed up enough that he thought he was happy.
I think it was self-destruction at the highest possible level, and I think the rest of us were bit players in the deal, and we didn't even understand that.
I wanted the bad stuff to stop, but I didn't want to quit using the drugs, and it doesn't work that way. You can't half be sober. It's either all or nothing. Yeah, I'd go out and get all screwed up or get arrested or do some jail time or something and then say, I'm done, I'm cleaning this up, I can't take it anymore, and would go around telling everybody, hey, I didn't drink for 3 days, you know, aren't I great? Back then, I was always trying to quit for somebody else other than myself. Life was getting progressively worse and worse, and I remember it was my dad's birthday, April 12th, and I went out drinking, and that drinking continued to the next day when I went to see Guns N' Roses. My friends found me outside of the arena up in Detroit with no shirt on, just sitting out there with my pants unbuttoned, leaning up against a pole. Got up the next morning, started drinking again as soon as I woke up. Driving home, and evidently I got a flat tire at Jiffy Lube. In the process of talking to Larry on the phone and telling him to come get me, I took down my pants and started urinating all over the floor and all over the desk of this guy's place in Jiffy Lube. The cops came and arrested me, obviously, and I was taken to jail where I registered a .36 on the breathalyzer test when a 4.0 is legally dead. Larry came and picked me up, took me back to my grandma's house. It's 3 or 4 in the afternoon now, and I drank again into the following day, another bottle of booze and some more drugs or whatever, until about noon on April 15th of 1993. And I distinctly remember drinking a beer and finishing that beer and putting it down and saying, that's it, I'm done.
It was literally like somebody threw a switch and he said to himself, I really don't need this anymore. And he quit.
The last time I decided to quit drinking, I didn't tell anybody because I didn't care who knew. It wasn't like I was on a crusade to tell people. I let my actions speak for my words. And that's when I knew I was onto it. When I decided enough was enough. My first step was to call somebody from a 12-step program and say, I'm ready to do this for myself. What do I need to do? My life at that point was, I like to describe myself as being physically, spiritually, and emotionally bankrupt. I was wiped out. I had lost my family, my friends, and more importantly, I guess, I had lost myself. I spent the first 2 years of my recovery just going to 12-step meetings, sometimes twice a day, but always on a daily basis to learn about my addictions and how to overcome those addictions. I also talked with people in recovery, counselors, therapists, just to learn about this addiction and how I could get it under control and put my life back together. And by no stretch of the imagination am I saying that this is an easy task. There was many times where I battled the urge to use drugs and alcohol. I dreamt about it. I had cold sweats over it. I thought about it.
Staying sober isn't a free ride. It's not an easy thing to do. I don't think you ever lose that want to escape. And for alcoholics and addicts, they escape by using. And I don't think that ever goes away. I think you know what to do when the thoughts hit you.
Sometimes it was very difficult to go to the 12-step meetings. I'll be honest with you, there were times where I don't want to do this, but I knew it was helping me. I could see it. I could see my life starting to get better. I needed to attend these meetings to achieve sobriety and maintain sobriety. So I was willing to do whatever it took, regardless of if I wanted to do it or not, because those people had what I wanted. So I did what they suggested, and it worked. My battles with it are fewer and they are less harsh, and that's something that I'll probably do the rest of my life. I just don't know how often and how difficult they'll be, but that's part of the gig of being an addict, is you got to deal with this stuff. About a year ago, I happened to be at my grandmother's house while she was spray painting some angels. She makes crafts and so forth, and the smell of that paint reminded me of fresh, pure cocaine, and it literally just came over me like, oh my God, that sounds so good to do a line of cocaine right now. And I turned and looked at my grandma and I said, can you believe that after 9 years of sobriety, that stuff still has that strong of a hold on me? And that's something that's never going to go away. I am always going to have that because I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Todd still battles recovery day by day by very low self-esteem. He still has a temper. He still has a lot of anger towards his real mother. He threw his life away for 13 years of drinking and drugging, trying to block his mother out. And now that he's not using, he's still battling with his mom committing suicide.
Todd speaks of the death of his mother. I think he's still dealing with that, and that's something that anyone would be dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
We went to her gravesite on Mother's Day. I pretty much had to drag him there. It's when we first had Skylar. She was only a couple months old. We took her there, and he put a flower on her grave and said, "See what you're effing missing." I mean, right there, tells you how much anger he had towards his mother. Like, how could you leave a child? When I first met Todd, he would call his mom every name in the book, and now, he takes the kids to the gravesite so they can see her grave, Skylar asks about her, and he sits down and talks to her about her in a nice way now. So that's a big step for Todd.
When I figured out what had happened to my mom as a young kid, that was an issue. Then I blocked it out for those years of being a wasteoid. And now that I've been sober again for 10 years, it's like, hello, it's me again. I'm right here. What are you gonna, you can deal with me now or what?
What is the real problem here? Is it anger? Is it hate? Is it, what is it? And how does it affect me today? And how can I be a good son, because I'm a surviving son?
And what really solidified that, I think that her death, as much as I don't want to believe it had an effect on me, is Melissa said to me one day, "You think if I killed myself, that Skylar would be impacted by that?" And at the time, Skylar was 3.5 or 4 years old, and that's when it clicked, and I'm like, oh my God, she'd be devastated by that. And that's when I started putting the pieces together. I'm like, okay, whether I wanted to admit it or not, that had an impact on me. Was it an excuse for me to go do what I did? No. And do I say, oh, poor me, my mom died, I'm gonna be a drug addict? No, that's not what I want to convey at all. But I think it had an impact on me. And again, today, I just, I wish that she could just see what I have. I wish I could see her just one more time, just once. You see all these shows where people can channel and talk to the dead. I just want one time for her to say, hey, bozo, I'm here, you're doing good, keep your act together. I'm sorry, I screwed up.
I sit here and wonder, now what if that were me?
Yeah.
If I'd lost my life, left behind my wife and the child that I
Yeah, it's just, yeah, she just needs to see what's going on. Not so much for me, but for the kids and stuff,
It's not time to deal with it yet. And you're gonna get me crying. It's more of the need for validation. What would my mom say if she was here? And it's that pain that's there, and like you said, it's bubbling up. It's not time yet.
I'm just trying to, block it out and say, man, it's not, just forget it. Don't let it impact you, I've taken, this is a little tough, but I've taken my daughter to see my real mom's grave because she's, for one, my wife has told her what happened to my real mom, and I've taken her to see her just so you see what happens. Man, I've never broken down like that. Sorry about that. Man, that's tough. But yeah, I've taken her and I've said, look, this is what happened. Man. I look at that as, just being weak and not being able to handle it. It's like, dude, especially now, I don't want someone to look at me and go, you're 36, get over it. It's not like I dwell and whine and cry about this stuff. Sometimes it bugs me, but for the most part, it is what it is, big deal. She killed herself. There are greater tragedies in life, so what? Get on with it. And that's kind of how that's how I look at it the majority of the time. Now, sometimes I guess I become a normal human being and my real feelings come out. The main thing with her is having gone through what I went through and thinking about suicide and being an addict and all those things that I know she felt, I understand what she went through. And I even understand her killing herself. I mean, I give her credit. Melissa and I got married on August 24th of 1996. We have a beautiful daughter, Skylar. I have a 2-year-old son, Connor. And we just welcomed our new beautiful baby girl, Madison. Skylar was born 5 years to the day that I quit drinking. When she was first born, my first thought was not, oh my God, I have this daughter now. It was, you can't kill yourself because you're not going to do to her what was done to you. The cycle of addiction and suicide is stopping with me in this family. Right here, it's over.
I'm just real proud of Todd that he's made it this far, so it's cool. I had never doubted it. I figured either be dead or he'd succeed at something. That was my timeline for Todd. But since he made it past 30, now there's no limit to what's going to happen to him.
Todd's not failed anymore. Todd's passing. But for Todd, he has to pass every day. This is not about he's arrived, because he knows how close he was to the dark side of life. And for him, it's always going to be a tough step away from that.
Years after Todd had played, after he had gotten himself straight, he was playing senior hockey, and one of his buddies said, you know, you really ought to try and do more than this. Todd tried out for the Storm and made it, and was actually their third goalie.
He took all those years off and walked onto the Storm. You know, the ECHL, which is semi-pro, which was not no joke.
I hadn't played hockey for 10 years. I went back and busted my ass and made it to the Storm's level just to answer my own question. If I didn't get involved in drugs and alcohol, I probably could have done something with hockey.
First night that they needed him to back up, he called me and asked me to give him an inspirational speech. And of course, I told him the same thing that I told him when I coached him. I'd have all these big in-depth instructions for the offense and the defense, and I'd call Todd over and I'd look him right in the eye and I'd say, stop the puck. Stop the puck. That's your job, stop the puck. He pulled on a professional jersey, and for that shining moment, he stood in the twine and he was getting the job done, and it was great.
Cindy ran a lot of 5K and 10K races, and she was very good at it. And Cindy would come home weekend after weekend with a trophy. And Todd would look at her and say, you know, I work all year to get one trophy. You go out every weekend and get one. And Cindy looked at him one day and said, well, run.
When I was back playing competitive hockey, I looked at her and I had the utmost respect for her for what she was doing back then.
I always need something to keep me going. I used to watch the Ironman triathlon when they advertised the Hawaii Ironman. When I was in a coked out and drunken state, I used to watch that on TV and think, that's pretty cool, I want to try and do that someday. So that was the first seed that was planted in my Ironman career. And then watching my stepmom run triathlons was also an inspiration.
Being a person who is an addictive nature, he does things to the extreme, and you don't get much more extreme than Ironman.
It is the ultimate test in sport and then some. And I think it's not only an ultimate test in sport, but it also is the ultimate test in life. Just to get to the starting line is a goal in itself because of all the work it takes to even get to one of these. And then to have that culminate into a finishing photo with you carrying your kids through the finishing line, you can't put a price tag on that. It's better than any high I got off of a crack pipe or out of a bottle. I'll never forget finishing Ironman Canada and running down the chute and having Melissa hold Skylar, hand her to me, and I grabbed her and I'm running down the finishing line. I had my sunglasses on, which is good because I started getting teary-eyed thinking, I'm doing it, this is awesome. And Skylar's has her hand up in the air and she's going, Ironman.
I think Todd is trying to prove every day to himself that he could achieve something at the highest possible level. So I'm not shocked at all that that he's become addicted, if you will, to the antithesis of drug use.
He's changed from a lousy addiction to a good one, but it's still an addiction, and he still has to control it to whatever degree he can, but it's done worlds of good.
Anything he starts, he goes at full tilt. So when he started the Ironman stuff, I just figured that was another thing he was going to do, and do it well. And I have copies of everything that's been printed about him so far. I'm getting a little tired of reading all these things.
As far as him doing all this and succeeding, it never did surprise me. Whatever Todd puts his mind to, he'll succeed at it, and he'll probably be the best at it.
I suck at the Ironman, to be honest with you. I'm not any good at this. I finish them, but it's humbling for me not to be at the same level I was with hockey. How to tackle the Ironman is, it's like, I look at it as, how would you eat an elephant? You wouldn't, if you had to eat an elephant, you wouldn't walk in there and try and stuff the whole thing down your throat. It wouldn't work. You eat an elephant one bite at a time and keep eating until you're gone with it. And it's the same with the Ironman. You don't look at it like, oh my God, today when I wake up at 4 in the morning, I've got to conquer 140.2 miles of swimming, biking, and running, because that'll break you mentally. You just get up and you say, okay, I'm going to go for a long swim, and after that I'm going to do a bike ride, and then I'm going to run, and you just take it one thing at a time. When I start the race, the swim is very stressful mentally, and you swim to the next buoy, and once you get past the congestion of all the people and you start getting some room to swim, that's a big accomplishment. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to make the swim.
I'm not really sure when he decided that running Ironman is something that he wanted to do. If Todd's decided that's what he's going to do, then that's what he's going to do.
Then you get out of the water and you're like, yes, okay, I made it through that. It's time to tackle the bike. Once you get off of that bike ride, I know that I'm going to finish the Ironman. Even if I have to walk the marathon, I know that I'm going to finish another one. That's a big relief. Then you start running and you're like, okay, I want to finish it quicker. I want to beat my time. So then you start doing whatever you can to run faster and faster to beat your own personal best.
2.5 hours. My knees are killing me.
Next to getting married and the birth of my kids, this is the best high I've ever had.
Todd Crandell, right now, number 845 with the family from Sylvania,
If I could pick one thing that I've learned from doing the Ironman, it's anything is possible.
Sorry I'm late.
Anything is achievable. I've gone from where I was to finishing the toughest sport, coming on my 7th time tomorrow. Anybody can do anything they want. I've gotten off of drugs, which I never thought I could. I graduated from college. I own my own home, for Christ's sake. I have a lovely wife, 2 beautiful kids, a 3rd coming. and I do the Ironman all over the world. I mean, anything is possible for anybody.
That was rough. Racing for Recovery was formed after a newspaper article in the Toledo Blade came out about my story of being a former alcoholic and drug addict, and now doing the Ironman triathlon, being a homeowner, a college graduate, basically putting my life together. They ran a story about my life at that point, and from the response that I received from that newspaper article, that was the catalyst to start Racing for Recovery. I remember coming home from a 50 or 60 mile bike ride on a Saturday morning and coming up the stairs, and my wife was saying, "Todd, this phone has been ringing off the hook about that story in the newspaper." And I just thought to myself, I'm onto something here. I know my story is going to make an impact and help people. And the name Racing for Recovery, it came to me. The mission of Racing for Recovery is to prevent all forms of substance abuse and provide positive alternatives for those that are currently battling addictions.
I want to show that person that, hey, you can beat this and go on and achieve whatever it is you want to achieve in your life. If I'd just taken everything that has been given to me so graciously and sat back and did nothing, that's not right. You know, then I wouldn't be deserving of what I have, and I would expect it to crumble somehow.
I don't think that there's anything that Todd could do in his life that would be better, not only for him and his family, but as a contribution to the community to do what he's doing with Racing for Recovery. And he's got something to say. He's got a knowledge of both sides. He can tell kids or people in rehab things that the doctors can't tell them because the doctors didn't live through it.
But I did. I started smoking weed, and I never thought I'd wind up where I wound up, you know. And I know life can be so much better. I look at other guys that quit smoking weed, you know, and that's what I want. You know, I want, you know, I know it's one day at a time and everything else, but I want what he's got. You know, he's got a nice family. He's doing something good to help other people.
This isn't a guy who read a few books and took a few classes. This is a guy who walked it, lived it, breathed it, talked it.
Todd's got the courage to stand up in front of anybody and say, this is what I did.
It's not like when I was your age,
and
said, you know,
I may not be proud of the fact that I did it, but I'm proud of the fact that I got out of it.
That's why I'm just
I say to him, look, it's better on this side of the fence. I never thought when I was sitting in rehab that I could be up here sharing my story to help other people. But if I can do this, you can do it too.
Todd's terrific with kids, young people. He has a great rapport with, he always has. I think he's got a gift for it that probably a lot of people don't have. I think there's a major contribution he could make.
Man, Todd's story is so much like mine. It's like unreal. Like Todd's mom committed suicide, my dad committed suicide. Like most of all Todd's stories relate to a story I have in some way or another.
I would say the problem started when she was like in 7th grade, and it was smoking pot and smoking cigarettes. The judge gave her 28 days, and when she came out, all she talked about was Todd's story. And Brandy decided she was going to clean herself up. He's, you know, taken the time to pick up the phone and call her and say, you know, how are you doing? You know, right after my son died, he told me, you know what, why don't you let me worry about Brandy right now and you worry about you. I don't think he has any idea how much he's touched our lives and saved my daughter. He saved her life. And whether it's a phone call just to say, hey, Todd, you know what, I want to get high, or I'm high right now, he's there for her no matter what. A lot of people won't take that time for a young person. Not in this society, not in this day and age.
I'm not coming in here saying, hey, I'm the answer here. I'm just here sharing a story that I hope makes an impact. Not like I'm telling you, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't do this. I'm just saying, Look, I chose to do that stuff. And look what happened to me. I'll start off my presentation. I'll say, does anybody in here want to become an alcoholic and a drug addict and end up living in their car? And I won't get a lot of hands up, and I'll say, I didn't either. But that's exactly what I became.
A third aspect of Racing for Recovery is the 5K run-walk events.
I want to do the same thing that like Race for the Cure has done to prevent breast cancer. I want to do the same thing with substance abuse and have that be, I want it to be worldwide.
Everything's going well. I have no idea what I'm doing. That's why we have HFP here to do it.
I expect it to be a national program within a couple of years and eventually start trickling across overseas.
We had 184 signed up as of last night, and we'll probably get another 50 walking up today. It's going to be a good day.
And thank you very much for being with us today, and for Todd Crandell, the founder and president, for getting this whole thing started.
Todd's at the best place probably that he's been in his life. I can remember when Todd's idea of the future was 10 seconds from now.
Let's get the race going. Thanks.
Now he's talking about what races we're going to do down the road in a couple of years, and we're building towards this, and we're looking forward to doing that. And it's a world different.
We had 184 people signed up yesterday, and we had 294 people cross the finish line today. That's a success. With the support of my family, my friends, the people we impacted from Racing for Recovery, I think it was a fabulous first-time event.
He's helping change lives today for the better. Isn't it worth so much more to make an impact in life, to be significant? And I think when Todd gets to look back someday, and if he were to say, what would I do with that dash between the date I was born and the date that's going to go on my gravestone? He's going to say, yeah, there were some mistakes, some big ones. But who among us hasn't made mistakes? His have been cataloged at a higher level than others. But so has he brought significance to himself, to his family, to his friends, and to people that he never would have known if he hadn't gone through what he went through. So it's all about giving back for Todd now. And he is doing it. He's doing a great job.
I'm grateful that whatever I'm doing, it's helping people. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to take my story and make it help someone else.
She lies there and cries. Sometimes she gets so angry she just wants to scream. Her Prince no longer charming, wasn't like this in her dreams. Some days she wants to change her life, get in that car and leave. But deep down she loves him and the kids, and she's got those mouths to feed. She cries, forgive me, I think I'm losing you. Forgive me, 'cause I don't know what to do. It all seems so simple then. Where the hell did it go wrong? Where it start, where's it end? Well, they both keep a holding on. One day it hit him hard, laid his head in her hands. Looked up, said, I don't want to lose you, I hope you understand. So he looked into her eyes, said, this is what we'll do. If you give a little bit, baby, and I'll give a little bit too. And they said, forgive me, I still believe in you. Forgive me, let love pull us through. Forgive me, we'll take it day by day. Forgive me, 'cause I'm never gonna walk away.
Alcoholism and drug addiction is a serious disease that affects millions of people in this country, and
we've kind of watched his whole organization evolve, and the clients have always responded well to his speeches and his story. You know, he's not the guy in the suit standing up there preaching and saying you can do this and you have to do this. It's not like that. It's real to them, and I think you have to show where it was and where it is. Todd comes in and he speaks for a certain amount of time and then he leaves, and the client necessarily is still with us, and you can tell from the buzz going around and who's talking about what and who picks up the literature. I was with Todd when he spoke at a high school a couple of months ago, and you could just watch the kids in the school and watch, you know, adolescents, juveniles are very difficult to keep their attention, and the room was silent. And I think one of the things, and a good way to tell is, When the speaking is over, of course, they're all going to crowd around Todd like they do here when he's finished, but then it's the ones that pick up the literature, and we encourage them to go to the support meetings. And if they do that, it's as confidential as it would be any other meeting, but it's who follows through, who asks questions. You'll have clients that continually thank the staff for bringing him into the center, and that is something that's very, very new to me. When we bring speakers in, and I just think it's his genuine, he is the epitome of recovery. He is someone who knows where they've come from, and I truly believe that you have to have that kind of a knowledge, and you have to have that kind of empathy in order to be a good speaker and a good representative of recovery. And then they all get into the tattoos and the Ironman and all of that, and that kind of brings them in. And then when then he speaks his message, and that holds them in. And I think that's something that there's an art to doing that. When he comes in, it's almost as if he takes over the command of the room, where if you stand back and you watch the clients, like I've done so many times, and as he's speaking, you can see the clients react to what he's saying. And it might not be the whole room reacting to something he says, but certain people with certain issues will react to anything in his speaking. I think he's believable, and the emotion that he brings to his speaking is real. If there's one thing I've learned all these years, is that the clients can tell if someone's faking it, and the clients can tell if someone's not being honest. His speaking, his whole organization it just catapults the clients into an understanding of what they can do and what can happen to them in recovery. He's adding something to society. Smoking dope, you're not doing a whole heck of a lot. Running an Ironman with your family and teaching kids, he's putting a lot more into society than he ever has.
I came across Todd's story through Oregon probation. Was the first time I heard it. Basically, the probation officer, she has him talk, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go hear his story, and that's the first time that I've met him. It's pretty inspirational, to hear somebody how they've turned their life around. Actually, I think I walked up to him and I said it was pretty inspirational. I let him know that, it's a good story. It makes people really think about what they're doing with their lives, and that no matter where you go in your life, how bad it gets, that you can always turn it around. It's like this guy's not messing around. Like, he's telling you what happened to him. He's very honest about it, and that's what got me. There's nothing make-believe about it. He told you a story where he came from, and that's what grabbed my attention about it. And then a lot of things that you hear him, you can always pick out one thing in his story that you can say, you know what, I did that. And it's like kind of brings it attached to you, kind of, like in what you've been through. And basically I just like to turn my life around like he did.
Certainly Todd's to be commended for turning his life around and making something positive out of it, and especially wanting to go back and give back to students and friends and the community, so that he can maybe prevent someone else from taking the same course that he chose. So he has my admiration.
Being parents, this is one way that Todd and I can work together as being parents towards our kids, is because Todd has been through the addictive lifestyle of drug and alcohol, and I've never touched a drug. So we have, yeah, your dad's been through it. He knows how it tears your life apart. And then have not been through it, and I, lived a normal life without it. So, there's the negative and the positive. So together as parents, that's one way I know we can keep our kids clean.
He's contacted her, and she's also contacted him. She's called him. He gave her his phone number, his email address. I believe she's even got his cell phone number. And he has, you know, her cell phone number and her home number, and he's, you know, taking the time to pick up the phone and call her and say, you know, how are you doing? And I know he's talked to her on several different occasions since her brother has passed. So any person, whether they're young or old, can look at him and say, you know, but this is how I feel, and he can come back with, I understand, you know, because he does. He's been there. And I think that that's what helps give people like Brandy, you know, who have an addiction, the strength to get through. Because I don't think that my daughter would get anything out of AA or, you know, we went that route. You know, we've done the AA meetings. You know what? She's gotten more out of 15-minute conversations with Todd than what she's ever gotten out of an hour meeting. You know, and like I said, he can relate where I can't. You know, and I think once he came into her life and she knew there was someone out there that could relate to her situation, and I'm sure there's other people out there that can too, but you know what? He takes the time and he goes that extra mile because, you know, like he said, if he saves just one life, and he saved her life, that's exactly how I look at it. Every day, I thank God for bringing him into my life because my daughter, I know, is alive because of him, because she was on a road to destruction.
He's just very truthful, and he's very real. I mean, I guess that's the best way to say it. And he says, you know, it's a rough road, and it's hard for us probation officers, therapists, counselors to actually get down and talk with the kids because we haven't had the addictions, and it is hard to get there. But Todd has a special connection with these kids, and they just really go towards him, and hopefully they'll continue to follow in his path.